A lone cowboy found burn marks on the maid's back. What he did next? Jack had been riding alone for most of his life. He was a cowboy, used to the silence of the open plains, the smell of dry grass, and the creak of his old horse beneath him. His home was a small cabin on the outskirts of a quiet Texas town, far from the noise of people and the rush of the modern world. Jack liked it that way. He liked being alone because it gave him time to think, to watch the sunset, and to feel the rhythm of life around him. But that evening, something happened that would change his quiet world forever. The sun was setting in a blaze of orange and pink, and Jack had finished his chores at the ranch earlier than usual. He decided to take the long route home, through the edge of the town, along a dirt path lined with old oaks and wildflowers. As he rode, he thought about nothing in particular, just the soft sound of his horse's hooves on the ground, the cool wind brushing against his face, and the smell of the earth after a rare spring rain. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that reminded him why he loved this life. Near the edge of the path, there was an old manor that Jack sometimes helped with small tasks. It wasn't his house, but he knew the owner, a wealthy man who lived mostly in the city, often leaving the manor quiet and empty. Rosa, the maid, worked there. She was quiet and polite, always doing her duties without complaint. Jack had seen her before, but he didn't know her well. That evening, as he passed the manor, he noticed her through the window in the kitchen. She was carrying a stack of dishes, moving slowly, and something about the way she moved made Jack's chest tighten. He stopped for a moment, watching her, sensing that something was not right. Her shoulders were tense, and she seemed to flinch whenever she moved, as if every motion brought pain. Jack's instincts were sharp. He had spent years reading people in towns and on ranches, knowing when things weren't as they seemed. There was a heaviness in the air around her, a quiet sadness that made him uneasy. Jack dismounted from his horse and walked up to the kitchen door. "Evening, Rosa," he said gently, trying not to startle her. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and wary. There was a flicker of fear there, though he couldn't tell of what. "Evening, sir," she whispered, setting down the dishes with trembling hands. Jack offered to help her carry water from the well. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. As she turned to lift the bucket, he noticed marks on her back. They were faint at first, hidden under the fabric of her blouse, but as the cloth shifted, he saw red lines, angry and raw. Burn marks. His heart sank and a tight knot formed in his stomach. He had seen many kinds of injuries before, cuts, bruises, scrapes, but something about these burns made him feel a deep sadness. "Rosa," he said softly, trying to keep his voice steady. "What happened?" She froze, her hands gripping the bucket so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her eyes darted away, refusing to meet his. "It's nothing, sir," she muttered quickly. Jack didn't believe her. There was a story behind those marks, and he knew it. He had grown up in the country, and he had seen too much suffering to ignore signs like this. Still, he didn't want to push her too hard, not yet. He simply nodded, offering her a small, reassuring smile. "All right," he said, though his mind raced. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." They walked in silence to the well. The wooden bucket creaked as Jack filled it with water, and he noticed how Rosa flinched with every movement, as if the touch of the wood against her skin hurt. He felt a surge of anger, not at her, but at whoever had caused her pain. No one deserved that, especially someone as kind and quiet as Rosa. Once the water was filled, they carried it back to the kitchen. Jack tried to make small talk, asking about the chores and the weather, anything to ease her tension. She responded in short, clipped sentences, her eyes still wary. He realized that trust would take time. Rosa had been hurt before, and the fear he saw in her was not something that would disappear overnight. After helping her place the water where it needed to go, Jack lingered for a moment. He wanted to make sure she was all right, but he also knew he had to respect her space. "I'll check on things tomorrow," he said finally. "See if there's anything you need." Rosa nodded silently, and Jack mounted his horse. As he rode away, he kept thinking about those marks, about the fear in her eyes and the quiet strength he saw beneath it. There was a story there, a story that needed to be told, and he felt a deep sense of responsibility. For the first time in years, Jack realized that being alone wasn't always the safest path, not when someone else's pain depended on your courage. That night, back at his cabin, he couldn't sleep. The image of Rosa, small and frightened in the dim kitchen light, haunted him. He thought about all the people he had seen suffer silently over the years, about the quiet courage it took just to survive each day. He knew he had to do something, but he didn't yet know what. The world could be cruel, and Jack had seen it, but he had also learned that small acts of courage could make a difference. The next morning, Jack returned to the manor earlier than usual. He greeted Rosa with a gentle nod, trying to convey without words that she was not alone. Today, he thought he would take the first step, not to force her to speak, but to make her feel safe enough to do so on her own. He helped her carry firewood into the kitchen, noticing again how her body stiffened with every movement. "Easy," he said softly. "Take it slow." "No rush." Rosa's hands trembled as she followed his instructions, and for the first time he saw a flicker of trust in her eyes. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. For hours, Jack worked alongside Rosa, chatting quietly about mundane things, the weather, the cattle, the way the wind moved through the trees. Gradually, the tension in her shoulders began to ease. Jack realized that sometimes the first step to healing was simply presence, the quiet assurance that someone cared enough to stay. By midday, Rosa was able to smile, just a little, as she handed him a mug of water. It was a simple gesture, but to Jack it meant the world. He knew that trust was fragile, that the story behind those marks would take time to come out. But he also knew he had taken the first step. He had shown her that she was not invisible, that her suffering did not go unnoticed. As he mounted his horse to leave, Jack looked back at the manor. The sun was high in the sky, casting warm light over the fields. He felt a sense of determination settle over him. Whatever it took, he would make sure Rosa was safe. He would help her find her voice. And for the first time in a long while, Jack felt a purpose beyond the endless horizons and lonely trails. That evening, he returned home with the image of Rosa's cautious, hopeful eyes burned into his mind. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. That courage was not about strength alone, but about patience, care, and commitment. But Jack had learned long ago that even one person standing up for another could change the course of a life. And he intended to do just that. After that first evening, Jack couldn't stop thinking about Rosa. He went about his daily chores on the ranch, but the image of her cautious eyes, the tension in her shoulders, and the red marks on her back kept replaying in his mind. He had always been used to working alone, and he knew the world could be harsh, but seeing someone hurt and silent stirred something deep in him. He knew that ignoring it was not an option. He had to help her, but he also knew he needed to do it carefully. Trust could not be forced, it had to be earned. The next day, Jack returned to the manor earlier than usual. He wanted to be there when Rosa began her work, so he could help her with the chores and at the same time observe her condition. As he approached, he saw her moving quietly through the kitchen, carrying pots and pans with precise, careful motions. She glanced at him briefly and nodded, a small, polite gesture. Jack smiled back, keeping his voice gentle. "Good morning, Rosa," he said. "Did you sleep well?" Rosa's lips pressed together, and she shook her head slightly. I couldn't," she admitted softly. Jack noticed how her fingers trembled slightly as she arranged the utensils on the counter. It was clear she had many worries, and her body seemed burdened by more than just physical labor. Jack offered to help her carry a basket of vegetables from the pantry. As they worked side by side, he kept the conversation light, talking about the sun, the weather, and the animals on his ranch. Rosa responded quietly, but he noticed that her voice seemed a little less guarded than before. Little by little, he was beginning to earn her trust. After some time, Jack decided to gently broach the subject that weighed so heavily on his mind. "Rosa," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I couldn't help but notice you're back yesterday. Those marks, they're not from work, are they?" Rosa froze for a moment. Her hands shook and she looked down at the floor. She wanted to say it was nothing, to brush it off as if her pain didn't matter, but there was a softness in Jack's eyes, a quiet patience that made her hesitate. Finally, in a small, trembling voice, she whispered, It's from home, from my employer." Jack's heart tightened. He had suspected something, but hearing her words made it real. His mind raced. Abuse, especially when silent and hidden, could destroy someone's spirit. And yet here was Rosa, still working, still polite, still trying to keep moving forward despite the pain. He felt a surge of admiration for her courage, but also a deep anger at the cruelty she had endured. "Rosa," he said gently, placing a careful hand on her shoulder, "you don't have to hide this from me. You're not alone." She flinched at his touch but didn't pull away. She looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. I can't. If anyone finds out, he'll. Her voice broke and she couldn't finish the sentence. Jack understood. Fear had been her companion for a long time, teaching her silence, teaching her caution. "I know," Jack said softly. "I understand why you're afraid. But we can find a way to make sure you're safe. You don't have to live like this." Rosa nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. She had lived in a world where she had to hide her pain, where speaking up could bring even more suffering. But Jack's presence, his quiet determination, made her feel as though someone genuinely cared for her well-being. Over the next few days, Jack visited the manor regularly. He would help Rosa with chores, listen to her stories, and offer quiet encouragement. Sometimes they worked in silence, letting the rhythm of their labor speak for them. Other times he would share small stories from his life on the ranch, tales of animals, sunsets, and the quiet beauty of the plains. These conversations were simple, but they slowly chipped away at Rosa's fear. She began to feel that perhaps life could be kinder than she had been taught to believe. Jack also began observing her carefully for signs of danger. He noticed the moments when she flinched, when her eyes darted towards certain rooms, or when she hesitated to speak. Each observation was a piece of a puzzle, helping him understand the reality of her situation. He realized that Rosa had been enduring this for years, and that escaping it would require careful planning, patience, and courage. One afternoon, as the sun streamed through the kitchen window, Jack sat with Rosa while she prepared the evening meal. "Rosa," he said gently, "if you want, you can tell me everything. Only when you're ready, I won't rush you." Her hands paused in the motion of chopping vegetables. She looked at him, and for a long moment her eyes filled with fear but also a small spark of trust. It's been so long," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can." "You can," Jack said firmly but kindly. "I'll be here. We'll take it one step at a time. You don't have to face this alone." With a deep breath, Rosa began to speak, slowly and haltingly at first. She spoke of the harsh treatment, the endless chores, and the moments of cruelty that had left her fearful and alone. Jack listened without interruption, absorbing every word, every detail, every tremor in her voice. He never showed anger or judgment. He simply listened, and in doing so, he gave her something she had never had, a safe space to speak her truth. As the days passed, Rosa began to open up more. She told Jack about the small victories she had clung to, the moments of kindness that reminded her of hope, and the dreams she had buried deep inside herself. Jack encouraged her, praising her bravery and reminding her that her strength mattered. Slowly, Rosa began to believe that her life could be more than fear and silence. Jack also realized that he needed help. The situation was bigger than just the two of them, and ensuring Rosa's safety required more than just his presence. He thought carefully about who he could trust: friends in town, neighbors who had always shown integrity, and the local sheriff, a man known for fairness and diligence. He knew approaching the right people at the right time would be crucial. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack and Rosa sat outside the manor. The air was cool, filled with the scent of wild flowers and fresh grass. Rosa leaned slightly against Jack's shoulder, exhausted but relieved. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know what I would have done without you." Jack smiled softly. "You've been stronger than you realize," he said. "I'm just here to make sure you don't have to do it alone." In that moment, both of them understood something important. Courage was not always about facing danger head-on. Sometimes, courage was about speaking the truth, even when it was terrifying. Sometimes, it was about letting someone else help you carry the weight you had been bearing alone. Over the next few days, Jack continued to plan carefully. He spoke quietly with trusted friends and began to gather information about Rosa's situation without alarming anyone. They needed evidence, a way to ensure that when the time came, Rosa would be protected and justice could be served. He moved slowly, understanding that rushing could put her at even greater risk. Meanwhile, Rosa's confidence grew. Each small step, sharing a story, receiving help, walking without fear in the manor, was a victory. She began to believe that she could escape the cycle of fear that had defined her life for so long. Jack's quiet support and patience made all the difference. He never pressured her, never judged her, and never made her feel weak. By the end of the week, Rosa and Jack had formed a bond built on trust and shared determination. They were a team now, working together toward a common goal: safety, freedom, and a future where Rosa could live without fear. Jack knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he also knew that they had taken the most important step. acknowledging the problem and preparing to face it together. Jack returned home that night, the sky full of stars above his cabin. He thought about Rosa, about her courage, and about the responsibility he had taken on. It was not just about helping her escape her situation. It was about showing her that kindness, patience, and quiet courage could make a real difference in someone's life. And in doing so, he felt a deeper sense of purpose than he had ever known. For Rosa, the journey had only just begun. But with Jack by her side, she felt a small, precious sense of hope. The hope that one day she could walk freely without fear and that her life could be filled with more than pain and silence. And that hope, fragile as it was enough to keep her moving forward, one careful step at a time. Jack knew that helping Rosa meant more than just being there for her during the day. Her situation was serious, and she could not be left vulnerable. The next step, he realized, was to involve people who could offer real protection. But this had to be done carefully. Rosa's employer had power in the manor, and anyone who acted recklessly could make things worse. Jack spent hours thinking, planning quietly while working on his ranch chores, trying to imagine every possible scenario. One morning, Jack rode into town with a sense of purpose. The streets were quiet, and the sunlight glinted off the dusty windows of the small shops. He first stopped at the general store to buy supplies for Rosa, clean clothes, soap, and a few treats. He wanted her to feel cared for, even in small ways. As he selected items, he observed the townspeople, considering who could be trusted if he needed help. The town was small and news traveled fast, but there were people he knew would listen and act with integrity. He returned to the manor later that day, carrying the basket of supplies. Rosa met him at the door, her eyes widening at the sight of the neatly folded clothes and simple gifts. "For me?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with surprise. Jack nodded. "For you, nothing fancy, just to help you feel safe and cared for. You deserve it." Rosa's lips trembled as she accepted the basket. For the first time, she felt that someone was truly on her side, not just in words, but in action. She set the basket down and looked at Jack, searching his eyes for any hint of judgment. There was none. Only kindness, patience, and a quiet determination that made her heart feel lighter. After Rosa settled with the supplies, Jack began to gently bring up the idea of seeking help from the authorities. "We need to make sure you are safe," he said carefully. "It's not about punishment or anger. It's about protecting you, making sure nothing like this can happen again." Rosa hesitated. Fear tightened her chest, and her eyes darted around as if the walls themselves might be listening. I don't know, Jack," she whispered. "What if he finds out? What if it gets worse?" Jack placed a steady hand on her shoulder, careful not to startle her. "That's why we'll be careful," he said. "We won't do anything until we know it's safe, and we won't do it alone. There are people who can help us, people who will protect you and make sure no harm comes to you." The next day, Jack began quietly contacting trusted friends in town. First, he went to the local sheriff, a calm and fair man named Sheriff Thompson. Jack had known him for years, and he trusted the sheriff to handle delicate situations with care. In the privacy of the sheriff's office, Jack explained Rosa's situation in detail, emphasizing her need for protection and the importance of acting discreetly. Sheriff Thompson listened carefully, nodding as he took notes. "This is serious," the sheriff said finally. "We'll need to act cautiously, but we can help. We can make sure she's safe before taking any steps that might alert her employer." Relief washed over Jack. Knowing that someone with authority and integrity was on their side gave him renewed determination. Next, he quietly spoke to a few neighbors he trusted, people who had always shown kindness to Rosa and who understood the importance of discretion. Each person offered help in small ways, keeping an eye on the manor, running errands, or simply being ready to intervene if needed. Meanwhile, Jack continued to spend time with Rosa, strengthening her confidence and helping her feel more secure. Each day, she began to move more freely around the manor, her steps less hesitant, her posture less tense. Jack made sure to give her space, letting her decide how much to share and when. Patience, he knew, was key. Trust could not be rushed. One afternoon, while helping Rosa organize the kitchen, Jack noticed a small, faded scar on her wrist. It was a mark of past pain, hidden beneath her sleeve. He realized that her suffering had been long and layered, and that every scar, every mark, carried a story. He spoke gently as they worked. "Every mark has a story," he said, "but it doesn't have to define you. You're stronger than all of them." Rosa looked at him, a faint smile touching her lips. I never thought anyone would see me like that, she whispered. Most people just look away, Jack shook his head. I won't look away, I won't let anyone hurt you while I can help. As the days passed, Jack and Rosa prepared for the next stage. They discussed what needed to happen to ensure her safety, going over each step carefully. They planned how she could leave the manor safely if necessary, who would accompany her, and where she could go. Every detail mattered because one mistake could put her at risk. The tension grew, but so did Rosa's courage. With each small step, sharing her story, accepting help, speaking her fears aloud, she felt herself growing stronger. Jack encouraged her constantly, reminding her that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, Jack and Rosa sat outside the manor. The sky was painted with warm oranges and soft purples, and the wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers. They spoke quietly, planning the next steps and sharing memories of simpler times. Rosa felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years, and Jack felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that the next phase would be the most challenging. Finally, the day came when they were ready to act. With Sheriff Thompson and a few trusted friends prepared, Jack guided Rosa through the manor one last time. She moved with cautious confidence, knowing that help was waiting just beyond the doors. As they stepped outside, she took a deep breath, feeling the air on her face, feeling free for the first time in years. The authorities arrived quietly, handling the situation with care and respect. Jack stayed close, ensuring Rosa felt safe as she walked through the steps that would lead to her freedom. The employer was confronted, but because of the careful planning, there was no immediate danger to Rosa. Every detail had been considered, every precaution taken. That night, Rosa rested in a safe place, exhausted but relieved. She looked at Jack with gratitude and awe. I never thought I'd get out of there, she said softly. Jack shook his head, smiling gently. You did it. You were brave. I just helped you see that you didn't have to face it alone. For Jack, the experience left a deep mark on his heart. He realized that courage and kindness could change lives, that patience and careful planning could turn fear into hope. Rosa's bravery inspired him, showing him that even in the quietest, loneliest corners of life, strength could emerge. In the days that followed, Rosa began to heal. She spent time with people who cared for her, rebuilding her confidence and reclaiming her independence. Jack visited often, making sure she was safe and encouraging her as she took her first steps toward a new life. Each day, she grew stronger, her laughter returning, her movements freer, her spirit lighter. Jack watched her progress with pride, knowing that their journey was not over, but that a new chapter had begun. He had helped her find safety, but she had found her courage. Together, they had faced fear, uncertainty, and danger, and they had emerged stronger. Jack returned to his ranch, the quiet of the plains stretching out before him. Yet, he no longer felt the emptiness that had sometimes accompanied his solitary life. He had discovered the profound impact of presence, patience, and courage. By standing by Rosa, he had learned that true strength is not just in the hands that fight, but in the heart that supports, the mind that plans, and the spirit that believes in hope. After weeks of careful planning, Jack knew the moment of truth had arrived. Rosa's safety depended on taking decisive action, but it had to be done with precision. The fear that had haunted her for years was still fresh in her mind, and Jack knew that one wrong move could undo all their preparation. Yet he also understood that standing by and doing nothing was no longer an option. The morning was crisp, with a soft breeze rustling through the trees around the manor. Jack arrived early, as always, bringing with him a quiet determination and a calm presence. Rosa had spent the night at a safe location, a friend's home in the neighboring town, where she could rest without fear. Jack felt a mixture of anticipation and concern. He had seen her grow stronger, but he also knew the importance of remaining vigilant. As he walked around the manor, Jack reviewed the plan in his mind. Sheriff Thompson and his team would arrive discreetly, while a few trusted neighbors stood ready to assist. Everything had to proceed quietly, no sudden movements, no loud noises that could alarm the employer before they were ready. Jack took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He wasn't just protecting Rosa anymore, he was ensuring justice, and he had to do it carefully. Finally, the sheriff's vehicle appeared on the dusty road leading to the manor. Its presence was quiet but firm, signaling that help had arrived. Jack met Sheriff Thompson at the edge of the property, and the two men exchanged a nod. No words were needed. They both understood the stakes. Inside the manor, the employer was unaware of what was about to unfold. He moved through the house with the same arrogance and carelessness that had allowed him to mistreat Rosa for years. Jack felt a flash of anger, but he kept it in check. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protection and justice. Sheriff Thompson and his team approached the house with measured steps. Jack stayed at a distance, observing carefully, ready to intervene if necessary. He felt a knot of tension in his chest, not just for the physical confrontation that might occur, but for Rosa herself. Her courage, her voice, and her life were all tied to the next few hours. When the sheriff entered the manor, he called out firmly but calmly, "We're here to talk. No one needs to get hurt." His voice carried authority, and the employer, startled by the unexpected presence, froze. Jack watched closely as the tension in the room escalated. He saw the shock in the employer's eyes, and the realization that his actions were finally being confronted. The employer tried to dismiss the situation, claiming that everything was a misunderstanding. But Sheriff Thompson had come prepared. Jack had provided detailed accounts of Rosa's experiences, and the sheriff presented them calmly, laying out the evidence without raising his voice. Jack could see the shift in the employer's demeanor, the arrogance faltering, replaced by unease. Outside, Jack stood with a few neighbors, their eyes fixed on the manor. They had been ready to intervene if needed, but so far, the situation was proceeding as planned. He could feel Rosa's courage in every detail of their preparation, the careful way they had documented her experiences, and the patience with which they had approached the case. It was all coming together now. Inside the manor, the confrontation continued. The sheriff gave the employer the opportunity to explain, but each explanation only reinforced the truth of Rosa's suffering. Jack listened carefully from outside, ensuring that everything remained under control. He could feel the tension in the air, a mixture of fear, relief, and anticipation. This was the turning point, not just for Rosa, but for the life she had been denied for so long. Finally, the employer could no longer deny the evidence. The marks on Rosa's back, the consistent accounts of abuse, and the testimony provided by Jack and others made the situation undeniable. Sheriff Thompson spoke with authority, explaining that justice would be served and that Rosa would no longer be at risk. Jack felt a rush of relief, tempered by the knowledge that their work was not yet complete. Rosa needed support, care, and reassurance as she processed what had happened. Meanwhile, Rosa, hidden in the safe location, felt a mixture of fear and hope. She had trusted Jack, and he had delivered on his promise of protection. The authorities were handling the situation, and she could finally breathe without the constant weight of fear pressing down on her. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of control over her life, and that was empowering. After the confrontation, Jack returned to Rosa, ensuring she knew everything was under control. "It's over," he said softly. "You're safe now. They've taken care of it." Rosa's eyes filled with tears, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and lingering fear. I can't believe it," she whispered. "After all this time?" Jack nodded, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've been brave all along," he said. "You survived everything that came your way. Now you can start living for yourself." In the days that followed, Rosa began the slow process of healing. The legal proceedings ensured that her employer would face the consequences of his actions, but Jack knew that recovery was more than just justice. It was about rebuilding trust, finding confidence, and reclaiming the parts of life that fear had taken from her. Jack spent time with Rosa, helping her navigate her new reality. They talked about small, everyday things, the weather, the farm animals, even the simple pleasures of a warm meal or a quiet sunset. These moments, seemingly ordinary, became milestones in her journey to healing. Each day she felt more empowered, more confident, and more like herself. Jack also made sure Rosa knew that she was not alone. Friends in town checked in, neighbors offered support, and the sheriff continued to ensure her safety. Jack realized that courage was contagious. Rosa's bravery inspired the town to recognize the importance of protecting those who were vulnerable. The turning point had come not just in the confrontation with the employer, but in the quiet moments afterward, when Rosa began to believe that she deserved a life free from fear. Jack watched her grow, proud of her resilience and grateful that he had been able to help. For Jack, the experience was transformative. He had always valued independence and solitude, but he had learned that true strength often comes from standing beside someone else, offering support when they need it most. His quiet presence had made a difference, and he knew that courage and kindness could change lives in ways that force or anger never could. As weeks passed, Rosa's confidence blossomed. She started taking small trips into town, interacting with others, and reclaiming her independence. Jack accompanied her at first, ensuring that she felt safe, but gradually she learned to trust herself again. Each step, each decision, reinforced her belief that she could live without fear, that she could be in control of her own life. Jack returned to his ranch, reflecting on the journey. He realized that the turning point had not been the confrontation itself, but the culmination of trust, preparation, and unwavering support. Rosa had found her voice, and justice had been served, but the true victory was the restoration of her spirit. He knew that life would not always be easy for her, but he also knew that she had discovered an inner strength that no one could take away. And for Jack, that was the most important outcome, the knowledge that standing by someone in need could make a lasting difference in the world. Even as he returned to the quiet of his ranch, Jack felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond his solitary life. He had witnessed courage, inspired hope, and helped someone reclaim their life. And in doing so, he realized that the greatest adventures often come not from traveling far or facing danger alone, but from helping another person find their way out of darkness and into the light. After the confrontation with the employer, Rosa's life slowly began to change. At first, the world outside the manor felt overwhelming. Years of fear and silence had built invisible walls around her, and even small gestures, walking freely down a street, speaking to strangers, laughing without worry, felt unfamiliar. But Jack was always there, patient and steady, reminding her that she could take one step at a time. The first mornings after the events felt strange to Rosa. She woke up without the usual dread that had haunted her for years. There was no tense anticipation of someone's anger, no fear of sudden punishment. She felt a strange sense of freedom, as if a weight she had carried for so long was lifting, just slightly at first, then more with each passing day. Jack continued to visit her, offering support and companionship. He never pressured her to act before she was ready. Some days they would sit in silence, watching the sun rise over the hills. Other days they would talk quietly about the future, about simple pleasures, or about the small joys they often overlooked. Rosa began to understand that life could hold happiness, safety, and peace, even after long years of hardship. With Jack's encouragement, Rosa started reclaiming parts of herself that had been hidden away. She began with small tasks, going to the town's market, walking along the fields, and interacting with neighbors she had once feared. At first, her movements were cautious, her voice quiet, but each day her confidence grew. She realized that the world was not as dangerous as it had once seemed, and that there were people who genuinely cared for her well-being. Jack also helped Rosa explore her own talents and interests. She had always been skilled in household tasks, but she had never had the opportunity to pursue anything for herself. They spent afternoons in the kitchen, experimenting with new recipes, or in the garden, planting flowers and vegetables. These simple acts gave her a sense of accomplishment and independence. She began to feel that she could shape her life in ways she had never imagined. The townspeople, who had always been aware of Rosa's quiet presence, began to notice the change in her. Her smile returned, small at first, then brighter with each passing day. She spoke more confidently, interacted more openly, and even shared stories of her past struggles in a way that inspired empathy and respect. Jack watched her progress with pride, knowing that the journey had been long, but the destination, her newfound strength and hope, was worth every step. Rosa also began to rebuild her relationships with trusted friends. Those who had quietly watched over her during her years of fear became active participants in her life. They celebrated her victories, no matter how small, and offered support when challenges arose. This network of caring individuals reinforced her belief that she deserved kindness, respect, and safety. Jack, meanwhile, continued to provide quiet guidance. He knew that Rosa needed space to grow independently, but he remained close, ready to help whenever she needed it. He also recognized that the healing process was ongoing, Scars, both physical and emotional, do not disappear overnight. Patience, understanding, and compassion were essential. One afternoon, as they walked together along a quiet path near the fields, Rosa spoke about her dreams. "I never thought I could imagine a future for myself," she said softly. "I always thought my life was just surviving day by day, but now I can dream." Jack smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. "You deserve to dream, Rosa, and you deserve to make those dreams real. You've been through so much, and yet here you are, stronger than ever." Rosa's voice trembled with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "You stayed by my side when I didn't even believe in myself. You gave me courage." Jack shook his head gently. "You had the courage all along. I just helped you see it. You survived, and now you can live." As weeks turned into months, Rosa's life transformed. She moved into a small, cozy home in town, a place of her own where she could feel safe and independent. Jack visited often, helping her settle in, and together they filled the space with warmth, laughter, and small touches that made it feel like a home. Rosa decorated it with flowers, homemade crafts, and little mementos that reminded her of freedom and hope. Rosa also pursued new opportunities. She began teaching small cooking and gardening classes to children in the town, sharing her skills and creativity. Her confidence grew as she interacted with students, and she found joy in helping others learn. This new chapter gave her a sense of purpose beyond survival, showing her that life could be fulfilling and meaningful. Jack watched her transformation with quiet pride. He knew that the person Rosa had become was not defined by her past, but by her courage, resilience, and determination. She had faced fear, stood up for herself, and allowed kindness and support to guide her toward freedom. And in the process, she had discovered that her life was her own to shape. The town, too, began to change. Rosa's story, though shared quietly and respectfully, inspired others to recognize the importance of compassion, vigilance, and support. People began looking out for one another more, understanding that even quiet acts of courage could change lives. Rosa had become a symbol of hope, demonstrating that even in the darkest times, strength and resilience could shine through. Jack's own life had changed as well. He returned to his ranch, but solitude no longer felt empty. He had discovered the profound impact of standing beside someone in need, of offering support when it mattered most. His quiet, solitary life had gained purpose, and he felt a deeper connection to the world around him. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with warm colors, Jack and Rosa sat together on the porch of her new home. The air was filled with the soft sounds of nature, birds singing, wind rustling through the trees, and the distant hum of the town settling for the night. Rosa leaned slightly against Jack's shoulder, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. "I feel like I can finally breathe," she said softly, "like I'm truly alive for the first time in years." Jack smiled, his heart full. "You are alive, Rosa. You've earned this. You faced fear, found your courage, and embraced life. You deserve every bit of happiness and freedom that comes your way." Rosa turned to him, eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you for never giving up on me," she whispered, "for showing me that life could be more than fear." Jack nodded, feeling a quiet pride. "I didn't give up because I saw the strength in you. You carried it all along. I just helped you see it for yourself." In the months that followed, Rosa continued to flourish. She built friendships, pursued her interests, and embraced opportunities she had once thought impossible. Jack remained a steadfast presence in her life, not as a protector, but as a friend, someone who had helped guide her toward a brighter future. Rosa's journey was a testament to courage, resilience, and the power of support. She had faced fear, overcome challenges, and learned to trust herself and others. Her life, once shadowed by pain and uncertainty, was now filled with hope, joy, and purpose. Jack, too, had learned invaluable lessons. He had discovered that true strength is not only measured by skill or endurance, but by patience, compassion, and the willingness to stand beside someone in need. By helping Rosa reclaim her life, he had found a deeper understanding of courage, hope, and the transformative power of kindness. Together, they had created a life built on trust, respect, and support. Rosa's past no longer defined her. Her present and future were hers to shape. And Jack, once a lone cowboy wandering the plains, had found fulfillment in helping another person discover the light that had always been within her. As the sun set on the horizon, casting warm, golden light across the fields, Rosa and Jack sat quietly, reflecting on the journey they had undertaken. It had been long, challenging, and emotional, but it had led to a life filled with possibility, freedom, and hope. They both understood that while the road had been difficult, the destination, healing, empowerment, and the rediscovery of life's joys, was worth every step. Rosa looked at Jack and smiled, a full, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I feel like I finally belong in the world," she said softly. Jack smiled back. "You do belong, Rosa, and now the world can see the courage, strength, and heart that you've always had." The journey was complete, yet it was also the beginning of something new. A life where fear no longer dictated choices, where hope guided every step, and where kindness and courage could shape a future brighter than either of them had ever imagined.